Welcome, everyone. I'm sitting down with, I guess I could say at this point, a friend of mine,
There you go.
Lawrence
Sure.
Reif. Lawrence has been in Baltimore and Maryland for quite a bit, quite a number, and he happens to also work with a group some people might be familiar with, Continental Realty, which is also a pretty large company. It's been out for a while. So, Lawrence, getting right into it, tell us, where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I grew up in Pikesville. My family was always in business. My father was in the real estate business, and I was brought up around real estate, buying older buildings, fixing them up, seeing the true beauty that lied within. And I guess I started building and restoring buildings when I was 19.
Really?
Yeah, I built some buildings in Owings Mills. I worked for an architect. I was his superintendent and looked at the details, built new buildings, and rehabbed a couple buildings for him. That was kind of my start in the field. Before, I guess, with my father, a little bit managing property, and then I took over a lot of my father's properties, managing alley shops in Pikesville, things like that. But it was Pikesville, Towson, and Baltimore County oriented most of the time in the beginning.
Wow. And all this while you're in, I mean, 19, I'm assuming at that point you're still in school or.
Sure. No, I went to the high school at Pikesville. I went to community college for a couple of years. After I didn't really get a degree, I decided that real estate and business is what I had passion for and moved in that direction.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Even myself also, like we have, I guess in my upbringing, we have like a religious school system. So I left that a little bit early and I got a high school diploma. Then I went to get a degree. And I understand the concept of leaving whatever system you're in early to pursue something else. And in this scenario, I guess both of us, it's really real estate. Whatever I did with, and I was a teacher for half a year, but still after that, COVID hit, and then I just went into other stuff, specifically real estate. But I get it, getting out of wherever you are and getting into what you love. And in this, for both of us in this scenario, it is getting into real estate.
Yeah. I've always been a person who followed my heart, and I didn't have passion. The school was good. I like education. I was very athletic, and I looked at different endeavors in real estate because my family was in that business, was a natural path to follow.
Nice. So your father, how many years prior to you getting into it was your father involved? Is also something that's your grandfather. How did I guess your father like start off this whole.
Uh, Both of my parents, Doris and Merle, were from business background. Their grandparents were anyway, and they had several local companies. Uh, One was called S. Shapiro and Son, was a large rag importer, sorter, actually international. And my father's father, Nathan, was in the real estate business and real estate. He had several little businesses that he started. So I always was brought up around that. And then my father worked for a family business for a while and then did some real estate things himself. And I helped him with those. I'd go to the buildings, we'd work on the tenants and odds and ends. We were very hands-on.
Back then, you probably didn't have as much regulations to even have to be hands-on.
No, but that was all part of who we were.
Right.
There's a passion. I think I still perpetuate that today. That's very important. I care about my tenants. I'm here today because, as I share with you, that I have respect, but I like you. I like your spirit and where you're trying to go in the world. And I'm trying to help a little bit. That's what I'm doing here today.
I appreciate that. So walk us through, I mean, so you're 19, you're starting to build properties, you're working with your dad essentially and effectively managing residential. How?
No residential.
Oh,
Yeah,
just
commercial and industrial. We had they weren't called flex buildings at the time, but they were manufacturing buildings, they were warehouse buildings, and small retail buildings.
oh,
That
interesting.
residential was really nothing I ever did.
Wow. So the real, I would say, the OG of retail and flex spaces. OGs is the original, the
Right.
original starting it out in Maryland. Really, wow. I guess Pikesville and Towson, I think you mentioned as well,
Right.
is definitely the place to start. Even these days, Pikesville and Towson is a very flourishing market with retail. I'm sure you know from your day-to-day job, but definitely those are flourishing areas to delve into and really deal with. So talk us a little bit through how you guess from there you get till today. I know you're working with your father. How did things go from there?
Things went well. My father and I, to say, and I really maybe, I started earlier than 19 years old. When my father would buy a building, rehab a building, I would ride with him. I would learn from him. I showed some spaces myself. So I probably started when I was 12 years old, 13 years old. It's being around business, being around real estate and seeing some of the avenues to follow and enticing things. And my father had a good eye for seeing buildings and what they could be and rehab some buildings in the city. And then the alley shops in Pikesville would be the closest to your office. That was something we bought.
Wow.
We had some major tenants there, but it was really a completely empty building. Put the storefronts in, paved it, roofs, all the services, and went from there.
The real value add play over there.
Yeah,
Really.
absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. So that's, I mean, like you said, even younger, getting the education directly from your father, and how, and it's a very good place to start. Even like myself, the reason I even got into real estate is I have a brother up north in Connecticut that does real estate, and he always like, even when I was in high school, whatever it was, whenever I had off, I used to go there. I used to do like the runs with him, going to all the properties, and he does residential, but still running to the dishwasher that's broken, it's leaking, and just seeing the basic issues that come up. And as much as even just like taking just a bunch of junk and throwing it out with him and just being very hands on. I should say initially I didn't necessarily like it. I think, as a teenager, you kind of want to just be free and do your thing. But I've grown to like it, which is what led me here. And I see that for you, I'm assuming from the beginning, it seemed that you always had this like passion to get involved in retail and really be hands on. Um, and from there, starting from 19, I mean, it's quite a few years until now. How did you lead yourself, and continuing from there, did you, until recently, really continue work with your father and the assets that he may have owned and managed? How did you leap from there?
I found other opportunities and with other people to invest with, and my father, he had a good balance in life, and he liked to help people as I like to help people. So I think he didn't feel that the richest person was the person that has the most. It was the person that needed the least. So he looked at life a little differently, and building a big empire was never anything that he wanted to do. So in all candor, I guess at a certain point I realized my father didn't want to grow like I wanted to, and I looked for some other partners, did some joint ventures with other investors in the area, and then probably about 40 years ago, I tandem up with Continental Realty, Mark Shapiro and Jack Lutkemeyer, and helped them with some projects. A large building behind the Reisterstown Road Plaza. They owned the plaza, and there was a 160,000 square foot vacant warehouse building, and that was probably the first big project that I did with them.
Wow.
And took an empty building and filled it up, and went from there.
Wow. So you said they used to own the Reisterstown Plaza, or are you saying right behind there, that only that
No,
specific?
they owned the plaza, all 52 acres of the Reisterstown Road Plaza, and the warehouse building behind it. It was Continental Store Warehouse is what that was called.
Interesting. Very familiar. I drive by there quite often. I mean, the Home Depot, as
Right.
everyone locally goes to that Home Depot.
Okay.
And then the train, and there's also the huge developments that they're planning. I mean, Baltimore City planning, we all know how that works, but they're officially planning a very large development right there, mixed use retail multifamily development, which should be interesting.
Great. It's a great location, the metro and access to the city. And if you believe in that kind of asset, it worked. It was a city in itself. It was over 700,000 square feet plus the warehouse building on 52 acres. And I know that it's just been sold again. We sold that to a REIT, and then the REIT has since sold it again. And I think there's great plans. I remember when I believe it was an airfield at one time.
Wow.
Yeah, before it was even developed. So it's growing up around there, and it's just coincidentally that the Princeton Sport Company, I believe they've been in business in excess of 90 years, is just closing down. And I bought my first bicycle just past the Reisterstown Road Plaza. No, this is just got this in the news 2 days ago. The
Right.
Princeton Sport on Falls Road is shutting down. But 3 generations or 4 generations of a family that after this period of time is pulling back, but started in that same locale as the Reisterstown Road Plaza.
And I'm sure that area has seen, like a lot of Baltimore, has seen some gradual change in a few different ways overall, just compared to from when just getting involved with the property until today. And even like you said, you bought your first bike in the area. So I'm assuming that it definitely is not the same. And in general, Baltimore, I'm assuming, and you've been here for a very long time, is not the same as the Baltimore that you may have grown up in.
It's not the same, and I'm talking 70 years ago. I bought that bicycle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely not the
That's,
same.
it's more than a lifetime. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what, really with the experience that you have, I think in today's day and age, it could get very tricky, right? Most, like you mentioned, even just earlier about scaling, right? There are investors that people are seeing today that are scaling too fast. And there's a saying that I've heard in the past, and essentially it says that the more properties you have, the more worries you have, right?
No, I don't think if you have if you have the motivation, if you have the inclination to move in that direction, I think you build structure, you build a machine, you build some other people in your organization to help manage that, and it's I believe that the richest person's, again, not the person who has the most, it's the person that needs the least. So simplifying sometimes, but if you want to grow, you need that infrastructure around you. You need maintenance, you need a management team, you need an accounting team, potentially a legal team, instead of an individual where it's you. If I wear all the hats myself, so yes, it's challenging. If you do it by yourself, you can only grow so far, you can only spread yourself so thin, and you can only be an expert in today's world, have that expertise in certain categories. Past that point, you're going to be outshadowed by people that have a machine that comes in, I mean infrastructure and a company to analyze it all,
Right.
manage it and run it and lease it and potentially sell it off at the appropriate time. So I don't find that overwhelming. I find that's a personal mindset that certain people want to be bigger and better, and other people say that I don't need any more than that.
Right, right. I definitely hear that. And I think, like you mentioned, there's definitely the aspect when it comes to residential about the hedge funds buying out in large scale, kind of like you mentioned, people that have very, very good structures and have a lot of money that are able to maybe beat out the private, smaller investor. But from what it seems like, based on what you're saying, is that if you know your market, you've been here for a very long time, and you have a good structure in place, there is ways for you to get ahead of maybe some larger institutions, especially because locally, I don't know if institutions are as active as they used to be. I mean, even for yourself, you could tell me, what are you continuously looking to stay local? Are you starting to look outside? How's the weather, I guess you could say?
Well, the weather's bright, and personally, at the age I'm at, I'm not looking to grow significantly. But as a company, Continental, and I'm here today not really to talk about Continental, as I shared that with you, they have a whole acquisition team, and they're looking to grow, and they've moved beyond the Maryland territory. They're trying to grow in many different states across the country, and grow and prosper, and following their investment criteria. So it's a whole different, as you build your machine, you've got to keep young talent healthy and happy and challenged, and you're going to have to go, and there's not enough in the state of Maryland, I don't think, to keep them busy. So they're looking for other opportunities. So it's for Lawrence, for myself, to move out of the state would have to be a great opportunity, but then to manage it, to be creative, to understand the infrastructure of the municipality I'm working in, you have to be pretty diverse, and that's a lot of time and a big commitment. So I've really focused in more on where my strengths were, where I had expertise, where I knew which attorney, which accountant, who to talk to in the county to try to work through the challenges to make things happen.
Right.
So when you move out of state, it's a whole different cast of characters that you have to interact with. You have to educate yourself, or you have to have expertise to open those doors. And so it limits where you can grow, and that gets more into, as I say, as a company you want to grow, you need that infrastructure to support you.
Right. And, properties are movable. So if you buy it there, it's not, you have to know everyone there. If you're in Baltimore for 10, 15 years, at this point, you have enough connections going to even Virginia, which is not too far away, or wherever. Now it's a whole nother set of politicians, a whole nother set of everything, contractors. And
You can even go, Yakov, to Carroll County, and it's a different world. You can go to PG County, in different world. We have property in both those counties, and I can tell you there's an educational curve, how business is conducted, what you need to do, and logistics of making all that happen. Those both are within a less than an hour drive from here, but they are like a different world in many situations. And then if you go to another state, or up and down the East Coast, or across the country, it's magnified. It's a whole new series of challenges. And if you've done a few projects like that, this is how I'm going to do that. This is the team I'm going to use, and I'm going to outsource to a local attorney that understands the nuances of the area and move in that direction, instead of just taking a Baltimore attorney out there. Well, that's not well received, and many times they're not licensed in that area, and they surely don't know the subtleties of whatever area that you're developing in. So you want to go to a pro that understands it and makes things happen.
correct. And I think it's very important people understand that concept of making sure that you're in a lot of scenarios, people feel that they're able to do it themselves, or they could just kind of work with whatever they have going. And, for example, like specifically attorneys, if you have a good relationship with an attorney and you're looking to move into another area, it might be easy to just say, hey, let me work with who I have now, even if he's inexperienced in this other area, even if he is licensed, right? Versus working with someone that has local knowledge, right? Imagine someone went to an attorney that is well connected with everything locally. It's another ball game if, let's say, if you're working even with zoning, right? If someone from out of state needs to work with zoning and they have basic knowledge, they're not going to really push the envelope. Versus if you're working with the right people locally in each individual county or state, whatever it is, that will help push the envelope to do whatever it is you have to do. You know, like you said about the behind the Ricerstown Plaza, that development. I'm assuming a lot of whatever was done was because of the connections that you had locally to help push it along. Because otherwise, I know working with Baltimore City in general, whatever the capacity is, could be tough to work with.
All municipalities have gotten more challenging. And the sophistication has grown, how they analyze project, how they supervise, how they inspect. Uh, the city's fine, and I wish them, nothing but Godspeed in theory. The county's the same thing, but as a different county executive comes in or a different mayor comes in, they have different perspectives on it all. The sophistication that we had as a company when we owned the plaza has changed significantly in the 15 plus years that we ago that we sold. Maybe it's even 20. I don't know the exact date. Life has changed. We're looking at life in different directions, and to make the assumption that we're an expert in every field, we're not. Especially when you move out of your core property. Whether it's Baltimore County, but if you start moving out of the state, you have to get the expertise in that area to help you. I think you do anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess talk, on a personal level when it comes to investments, like how has what you're looking for changed? Specifically even just area or even just the type of real estate that you're personally involved with. Have you changed your outlook? And are there specific reasons why you might have said, you know what, I used to work here, but the area changed, or the demographics changed, or the specific of this type of property changed, or you can't find certain tenants anymore? What have you seen? You've been doing this for a while, progressed from when you started, and different type of trends, I guess you could say, that you've picked up on.
Yeah, I don't think I'll talk in my tense, first tense, that I personally have not changed that much. I've always been a value added person. I looked to buy, I saw the true beauty that lie within, whether it was a rundown building or needed all the roof walls, whatever improvements that redo the utilities or things like that, solve the problems, even environmental challenges. None of those things bother me. I felt that I could make a fair buy, recreate, regenerate the property for a new life for this chapter, and I was invested in what's good today and better tomorrow. Instead, I wasn't buying just cash flow. I was trying to find fundamentally good property, potentially that empty never bothered me, challenges never bothered me. I always felt I get far better returns, and I did many times what a traditional person would get because I didn't mind buying some property that had some edge on it. So as my criteria has changed, mine hasn't, and I don't want to keep talking myself and Continental, but Continental looks at life much differently. They're trying to grow in a vaster fashion, so they're not looking for as many challenges, but they do for sure look for value added, well located. What do we understand about this market? How can we enhance the leasing, the rent roll, the occupancy, carving out properties, being creative with the asset. So I'm going to focus more on me today to answer your question. I think that's a fair way to look at it.
No, 100%.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting to see in general how from COVID, I think a lot of retail tenants and even just retail owners had big struggle. And then recently it's picked up again. I don't know if you've seen that with your properties or what you're working on. Would you be able to help shed light whether, first of all, if that happened to you or not? And if yes, kind of what do you think may have changed that now all of a sudden, from when I see retail all of a sudden, when it comes to just real estate investors, they're getting back into it now?
Real estate's very strong, very bullish on it. Great opportunities. You have to be cautious a little bit. Pandemic is not a thing of the past. It's in people's minds. We were all affected by it in one way, shape, or form. Some more dramatically than others. I've had some friends that passed away that were infected with COVID and didn't make it through. I yesterday lost a deal because of, in theory, tenant was very concerned about tariffs and bringing things in from overseas and how it would affect their business. And we had a handshake. I thought we could do a deal. And as of, in theory, yesterday, I was told no, that they're going to hold tight and kind of stay where they are and not grow. And it was actually a good deal. It was great for the tenant and good for myself. And disappointed. I I don't usually, not a contrarian. I don't take no very well. I want to know why not. No, I'm going to try to work because I really
Work through
felt
it.
this was a really good location for this particular tenant. But there's just a firsthand within the last 48 hours something that happened that is effective of what's going on in the world a little bit.
It's definitely interesting just talking about specifically policies or other stuff that are similar to that may have changed just investments. Like very similar to what you're saying, I had a deal recently that we passed inspections and we really were very far along and it was very close to getting the deal done. And then since the president was sworn in, I believe the 10-year went up by about 100 basis points, or 50 to 100 basis points, which, based on the way the deal was underwritten by the lender, all of a sudden essentially killed the deal completely. And the buyer was obviously felt bad about it, but I told him there's absolutely nothing that I could do or that you could do. Like I could try to help you find other lenders, and we did that. But putting that aside, some things are out of our control, and we have to be able to say, you know what, I'll continue in touch with that buyer and your scenario, that tenant, because things could change. I'm not going to completely write it off, but you have to know when things are just not, not in our control. And like you said, I think it was smart that you said, you know what, let's talk about it, right? Let's see what's going on. And maybe, yes, it's a fear, but maybe there's ways that we could address it or whatever it is. And I'm sure you've gone through the process with that tenant. But yeah, there are things that happen that we don't have control of. And that's why getting on a little bit of a tangent here, but I think when someone calls me and they say, oh, I'm buying a property because in the future rates are going to go down and then the numbers work, I tell them, there's one thing I can't control, and that's the Federal Reserve or the 10-year. And I'm not betting on anything that if that rates might come down. If you can add value, could you fix certain issues that are in your control? If there's an insurance issue because it's a bad roof, could you replace the roof and get low insurance? Those are things that are in my control. But controlling interest rates or anything that are on a federal level, aside from making your vote, there's not much that you could really do.
You can't control the interest rates, but you can be creative and you can do some adaptive financing or some bridge financing or things like it. All depends on how good the asset is. There's ways of moving with the flow. In this call that I got yesterday, I like this tenant enough, what they did. I like the spirit of the tenant, and I'm showing them something else tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. Considerably less rent, inferior location, not as good a fit, and less square footage actually. But I want to keep the conversation open because I like to work with them. So I'm a real people person, and my tenants I feel like I'm their partner. I'm not really a financial partner, but I have a vested interest in them being. I want the deals, all the deals I do, to be good for myself as investment. But I want it really. I want see my tenants grow and thrive in the buildings. It's very important to me. So the tenants, when they have a problem, they know pick the phone up and ask a question. Either help with something, whatever it might be, and if I physically can, I'm there for them. And hopefully that comes back and is beneficial to me in my journey. But spiritually, it's very important to me.
Yeah, and you know what? Even just on a basic manner, I think it's something that I've seen recently that's changed in the industry, whether you're a broker, you're an owner, whatever it is. You're here to provide value to people, essentially. That's how I view it, right? And not every call I'm making to people is about buying or selling. Sometimes adding value is just saying, hey, how's it going? Do you need help with leasing? Do you need help with just insurance? I just recently helped someone lower his insurance costs by about $200 a unit because I got him connected to an insurer that I think gave him better coverage for less. Or I had a scenario recently where the deal closed and the buyer had some questions, and I was like, you know what? Obviously, I'm going to help you pass then. I think that I don't know if every broker does or doesn't do that. That doesn't make a difference to me. But what makes a difference to me is that I know what I'm doing, and I'm here to help people. And maybe eventually I'll get sales out of it, which obviously I do eventually, but that's not necessarily my goal. My goal is, hey, did you hear that BGE and the water bill just went up by 3% and the sewer just went up by 15% in the city, right? Did you hear about that? Well, check your piping. Maybe it's leaking. Now you've got to fix it because it's about to get very expensive. And BGE specifically went up 30% since COVID, which there's been a whole outcry now about it. So making sure, like you said, helping them, right? Even if that space didn't work out, okay, it's a smaller space that's not as a good fit, but they need the space and it's better fit for them now because of the scenario of where the economy is. And sorry.
No, I agree with where you're coming from. Maybe the perspective would be a little different than mine. I'm here today because of your and my interaction with the Charles T properties
Correct.
and the expertise, the passion that you did things with. Same thing. I don't know that you really were, hope you were calculating what you were going to get out of it. I believe as you share your light, you can't help keep it from yourself. So going the extra yard for people, I always try to exceed people's expectations. And hopefully something comes back, but I never do it for that reason. I do it because it gives me joy. And that's the only reason I'm here today, that I could see you cared about people and you were going that extra yard. And you asked me to come do this today. I really don't even know what a podcast is. And I said, sure. I'm like, okay. I mean, I thought, oh, it can only be something positive, and I tried to look at it in that perspective. But for every tenant, for every deal, and you look at the utilities, uh, I ask my tenants tough questions. Have you budgeted for this? You're talking about ratcheting up. I have a tenant that was showing me they were losing money, and in 2 years they're going to be making $24 million a year. I said, well, I want to say to him candidly, do you really believe that? But I didn't do it. I asked some questions, and that particular tenant I did not sign up with. I thought their expectations were a little ridiculous, and they were looking for a turnkey deal for me to spend a small fortune improving in space. So if their model's off a few years and they got in trouble, it was a very specialized space, and I didn't want to put that exposure for myself and my partners in this particular case. It was the deal that I had partners with, and I didn't want to grow in that direction. So I pulled back. And fortunately, within a week, another tenant came along, signed a lease, new 10-year lease, not the kind of capital improvements that first tenant want, and had really good financials. And so for myself, I was a little more conservative, maybe a little less profit, but I didn't feel that I had the exposure that the other deal had. So looking at utilities and some of what you look at is smaller or minimal costs when you're for a smaller business person looking at a deal or a tenant, they've got to understand all the expenses and have, like I say, have you budgeted this or understand this is a net lease and you've got to pay tax, insurance, and maintenance. If something happens, do you have those reserves? Do you have that wherewithal? And some people have never even thought about that. They're following their heart, and boom, even these properties that I talked about that were just sold that you had some interest in, neither one of those buyers came to the building. Couldn't believe it. I mean, I would never buy a building that if I didn't touch it myself, that someone that I trusted would look at it, analyze it, walk through it. Didn't even walk through the buildings. I found that I thought, I wasn't their broker, I wasn't their advisor, but I was said, at the least, walk through the building. I'm sure it'll prompt a few more questions, and maybe you just be a little more diligent in some of your expenses or underwriting.
Correct. No, it's definitely an interesting concept that people are willing to just buy sight unseen. And I've definitely done deals sight unseen in the past. And I think in scenarios it works is solely scenarios. Let's put a preemphasis. There's always risk when you do that. Always. The investor that it could potentially work for is the one that says, this is my worst case scenario. This is what it's going to cost me. And my best case scenario, this is what it's going to cost me. But I still believe, even in that scenario, there's other risks. Like, you don't know if there's termites. I'm not saying that there is termites in that scenario, but you don't know. You never know, right?
I'm not worried about termites. I'm worried about zoning. I'm worried about historic credits or something where there's approvals and it takes you 2 years to redevelop the property, or code violations or things that you have to do to a building that maybe doesn't, in the purest sense, meet ADA or has other historic aspects or hurdles. Some people don't even look and they don't know. I could be completely wrong. These two buyers, I don't know them. I really never talked to them. It was handled by someone else. But from the outside looking in, that they never walked in the building, never called to ask questions. They bought it on the internet. I found that astounding. And it was real dollars and real prices. I collect many things. And once in a while, sure, you buy something on eBay and it's fun. You get a surprise. It's not really, they didn't photograph the back of it and it's broken or whatever. But there's a checks and balance. I could complain and say, oh, this person misrepresented. In this case, it was sold in a fashion that was where is as is. And these people, I think they owed it to themselves to take a little look at it for whatever it's worth. So for a diligent investor, I would. There's the only dumb questions, the one you don't ask. So I would look and see and scratch and not be negative about it, but just go with your eyes open, understand really what's involved in owning a piece of property.
Correct. And literally what you're saying, I think recently I was able, like similar to the scenario you were talking about with the tenant that you said, listen, we just don't think you're a good fit, and you didn't take them, and then someone else came along.
Okay, no, I didn't tell them that though. It's a up and coming company. They have about 5 locations, and I felt they told me out of the box we were looking for, and they didn't tell me. I gleaned this and asked. They're looking for a turnkey deal. And the build out was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I said, I don't typically do turnkey deals,
Right.
especially a specialized turnkey deal. You want general office and you want a conference room and a wet bar and a few things. Most people want that. That's not a problem. But when you want specialized improvements that no one else is really going to want, and after you move out, whether it's during the term, after the term, whatever it might be, I'm really going to have to either vanilla shell or fix the improvements, take them out because only 1% of the market would want that. I look at that deal differently. I amortize the improvements a little differently. And I many times look for that tenant to have some skin in the game and make some improvement. This particular tenant at the end told me they wanted me to be their partner, but they weren't really offering me any meeting. Our landlords are our partners, and there's some institutions that look at it and they will completely bankroll a tenant's use, the underwriting of the tenant improvement, whatever it might be, whether it's office or manufacturing or retail. I don't typically do that. I'm a little more conservative.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. It's a risk that that you would have to take if you would go that way, and I get it because if you do the build out and like you said, they're not necessarily cash positive right away, and then at some point they're able to file for bankruptcy. Hopefully it doesn't go that way, but anyways, you're gonna get stuck with an what we call an obsolete asset that people looking at it, if let's say an office space wants to come in and I'm going to make up that it was a doctor's office, the way that that's set up, it's not going to work for an office space. So I definitely, I hear that. And you're able to learn to accept the fact, I mean, in your previous transactions, obviously, come to learn that this is not it, but something will come along and something did come along. I think that's something that's important in real estate, being able to learn that life is in the moment, but also not in the moment. Things could come along that could be better. And it's hard sometimes to realize that, especially as a broker myself and investor at the same time. It's hard to realize that something good or better could come along. And sometimes it's not worth taking the deal that doesn't make sense for me today. And I'll give a quick example for an investment that I do own. I had a property where I was trying to rent it out for a long time. And we got tenants lined up, and twice last minute the tenant backed out. And the second time it was more that the program I was working with that was funding the tenant ended up telling me that actually they're only funding a minute amount of whatever the rent was. And I was about to say, just let the tenant in, but then I just got this gut feeling no, if the tenant didn't qualify for a certain reason, I'm not going to just put them in because I feel like I have a need to put them in. I didn't put them in. And then the next tenant that came about, the program actually paid 100% of their rent, and they were qualified, and I put them in, and I looked back and I said, you know what? I don't know what would have happened, but I feel a lot more comfortable with this tenant right now. And it was worth me saying that I just have to let the universe or God or whatever you believe do its thing,
Yeah, you said a lot there.
Sorry.
Sometimes the deals you don't get are the best deals, in all candor. And saying that's a stronger person to be able to do it. Sometimes you're motivated by a bank or a lender and say, hey, I said we audit you once a year and we see you've got this vacancy. We've underwritten this in a fashion. You're below your coverage. We'll give you 6 months to find a tenant. And if you're motivated like that, you're going to make certain kinds of decisions. An institution, someone that has a lot of extra cash, or you happen to have a loan, you buy a $10 million building, and we'll say 2 million of the 10 million is towards tenant improvements. People will be quicker to spend those dollars. Most of the work that I do, the tenant improvement work, is cash. And I look at it as my cash or my company's cash and I'm protective of it. I'm surely willing to spend some, but turnkey for specialized, that's too much exposure. And yes, there are times you just let it go. And yes, synchronistically, I believe good things happen. So I try to be optimistic about it. But making deals, that's important too. You need that to grow.
Correct.
Yeah.
ABC, always be closing.
There you go.
That's the coin. But tell me now, really, I've talked a lot about what you're doing today, and tell me kind of outlook going forward. What do you do for, what do you enjoy and what do you plan for the next few years coming along?
Uh, so at 73, I look at life a little differently.
You don't look a day over 65.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. But I don't feel it. I'm healthy and I'm blessed and I know that. So I look at life, I'm trying to make a little difference in this world. I put a lot of my time into helping people. I'm working on building a foundation to make a difference in many people's lives. And the richest person is not the person that has the most; it's the person that needs the least. So I feel blessed in many directions, and whether it's tenants I'm helping or people I'm helping, and there's a real part of every day I put energy into making a difference in people's lives, even today. When you asked me to come by, my gut was I'm too busy, and what's he going to ask about, and do I have expertise, and I said, you know what, I like Yakov, and this go ahead and do it, and it'll all work out, and I believe that. So it's I every day I try to touch almost everyone I touch. I try to make a difference in their life, even the simplest of things, and that's just the way I live my life.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
So for the future, it's more making a difference. Business is important, but it does not drive me. I have a relatively young son that's gotten into business. He lives in New York, trying to help nurture him. I have two new grandsons. And
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And I know you have a young family also.
Yes.
Yeah. So life's all about the journey, and I feel really blessed to share with many people, and I don't even have to know someone intimately or well to make a difference in their life. I get as much pleasure out of helping somebody that I hardly know, that I think they need some support, some guidance, some nourishment.
Thank God. I think it's a good perspective to have when, there's different people in the world, but, being able to say that, yes, I may not need anything, like you said, that is the richest person, but does that mean I just sit here and live in my own world? Or does that mean that I actually help other people now because I'm in that position, right? Not everyone necessarily, in a positive way, you view it like that. And I don't think everyone does.
Yeah, I don't look at it as the rich person's the person that can have that perspective, because I know the richest person's not the person that has the most. It's a person that needs the least. Certain very wealthy people, it's never enough. They need more money, need more energy, need more power. Power is, there are many ways of pushing. I think the strongest person, the person that's pushing up, but some people use their power to push down, to be oppressive with other people, to show how wonderful they are. That's just not anything that fit that I've ever looked at. So again, making a difference in other people's lives, sharing your light, that's a rare gift. And to go through life and live that, and live it every day with everyone you touch, is a blessing for all.
100%.
Yeah.
So before we finish off, I really appreciate, first of all, the time you took to come down here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
And really talk. And so before we do jump off, I always open the table for anything that you have on your mind, that maybe you prepared or that you wanted to share. Any questions for me? Totally open mic here.
Yeah, I don't think there's any secrets. I told you, from my heart. I try to answer your questions from my heart. Really, there wasn't any ulterior motive, and living a life lived for others is a life well lived. So that's not a business person's perspective, but for me it is. And you had in your little questions I saw before, I think about, wake up in the morning, there's some stretching and meditation and exercise. I try to do all that just as I start my day, and then checking just with my team to make sure things are flying and going. But I always try to reach out to a couple people in the morning that I know need a little love, whatever it might be. And it could be the simplest things. But yeah, in the past, I would think I would take someone on a trip or interact with somebody, and I think to myself, I'm doing this for them. But the truth is, I'm the one that got the gift. When I drop them off or say goodbye, I realized that, really the person that was richer for that little interaction was me. And it's changed my life a little bit.
It's definitely a positive and a good perspective that people should and could have if they work on it.
Oh, for sure. Everyone can do their little part. No question about it.
Beautiful. Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I will hope to see you guys on the next episode.
Fabulous.